212. Sehr verehrte Damen und Herren, die letzte Podiumsdiskussion, zumindest für diesen Tag, heute Nachmittag. Wir freuen uns, dass so viele Zuschauer gekommen sind, um zu hören, was passiert denn jetzt mit dieser großen Flüchtlingswelle und das Ganze mit einem Update auf die Frage, wie verhält sich der Tourismus dazu, wie verhalten sich Entwickler des Tourismus dazu, wie verhalten sich Reisende auch dazu. Wir haben gestern zur Eröffnung in einem der ersten Vorträge von Professor Dietmar Herz gehört, es ist das Jahrhundert der Flüchtlingsbewegung. Nicht nur die Flüchtlinge, die vor Krieg und Terror von zu Hause fliehen mussten, sind unterwegs, sondern auch jene, die vor Klimakatastrophen demnächst irgendwo ihre Koffer packen und woanders hingehen müssen. Was bedeutet das für Destinationen wie Türkei, Griechenland, aber auch für Italien? Es hat viele Visitenkarten verändert. Viele Länder haben möglicherweise jetzt Bilder, die doch für Touristen Ressentiments bedeuten, aber auch Belästigungen sein könnten, wenn es denn so aufgefasst würde. Kann, wer genießen will, die schönste Zeit des Jahres genießen will, auch diese Bilder von ankommenden Flüchtlingen in Booten ertragen. Oder genießen wäre das falsche Wort, aber sie sind Realität. Wie reagieren die Urlauber? Sind sie pikiert und wollen die schönen Bilder nicht? Oder ergibt sich eine Nachdenklichkeit, die uns alle das in den nächsten Jahrzehnten zumindest auch nachhaltig beeinflussen wird? Das Impulsreferat für diese Panel-Diskussion wird kommen von Christian Nordhorn. Er ist von der Katholischen Universität Eichstätt-Ingolstadt. Ich darf Sie sehr herzlich nach vorn bitten, Danke sagen, denn Sie sind eingesprungen für einen Referenten, den wir im Programmheft angekündigt haben. Vielen Dank also dafür, denn der Referent war verhindert durch verschiedene Termine der Hochschule. Schön, dass Sie also da sind. Sie nehmen uns jetzt mit und geben Antwort auf die Frage, gibt es vielleicht eine neue Form oder neue Formen von Gast und Freundschaft, also der Gastfreundschaft? Was sagen neue Forschungsergebnisse? Welche Forschungsfelder tun sich auf? Gibt es erste Statistiken? Und Sie geben uns einen Ausblick auf die Frage, ob und wie wir es schaffen, nämlich auch etwas Gutes aus dieser Situation zu ziehen. Schön, dass Sie da sind. Moderieren wird nachher die Runde Verena Papke. Sie ist Moderatorin, aber auch Expertin natürlich für die große Frage regionale Strategien in Bezug auf Tourismus, aber eben auch auf strategische Entwicklungen dafür. Und Sie sind tätig für SOS Mediterranee. Doch jetzt gehört unserem Referenten das Podium. Wir freuen uns auf Ihren Vortrag. Bitte schön.
Thank you, Ms. Weber. Thank you, Ms. Weber, for the warm introduction. As you've already said, I'm filling in today for Professor Pechlaner. He had a really urgent appointment in the university. That's why I have to fill in, and I'll do my best to give a keynote today on escape, migration, and tourism, and the perspectives of hospitality. We got a lot of inquiries for interviews in the last couple of weeks at the Chair of Tourism for this topic, so it seems to be a really trending and hot topic at the moment. And newspapers and radio stations asked us more or less the same questions. These were, why are you combining the topics of escape and tourism? And if you do so from a more practical perspective, when you do so, is it at the moment, from an ethical perspective, is it okay to travel to islands like Kos or Lesbos? How do the refugees influence the booking behaviors on the islands? And what are the consequences for these destinations in the short and in the long term? I think it's not possible really to give 100% clear answers here today, but maybe together with the panel we are searching for solutions today and get a bit closer to good answers to these questions. But why are we combining the topics of escape and tourism here today? We think that the essence of tourism is hospitality. And hospitality means always the quality of a relation between a host and a guest. Both have to feel comfortable and meet on honesty. And you could even say that hospitality is a core value of a society. And if you do so, it leads to a controversial discussion here. How the way the region or a country is discussing about migration, can you draw conclusions on how hospitable a country is? Or to put it in other words, if a country behaves restrictive towards refugees, is it a hospitable country then? Of course, you have to differentiate here. Hospitality is not equal to hospitality. We have a commercial hospitality. We find it in tourism. So guests are paying to receive services. Derrida, a philosopher, speaks here of a conditional hospitality. On the other hand, we have an unconditional hospitality. This is the hospitality towards refugees. They are just arriving in a country. They have to travel. They totally rely on hospitality. On the other hand, we have tourists who want to travel. For them, hospitality is maybe more than good experience during the holiday. It makes the holiday more authentic then. But how did we get to the situation today that we are discussing here about tourism, escape, and migration? Of course, everybody knows we have the high number of refugees, migrants coming to Europe, and Europe is grappling with the migrant surge at the moment. First, the question in Central Europe and in the Scandinavian countries was how to accommodate the refugees. We were searching for accommodations. And now the discussion shifted forwards. Now we are discussing about tourism and migration here. The migrant crisis may have hurt the tourism industry, especially in Greece. Tourists and migrants are sharing the same island there. So is it still okay there as a tourist to go to these islands from an ethical perspective, or is it still safe to go to these islands? Many of us have seen pictures like that, especially last autumn, when per day 2,500 tourists arrived in September 2015 on the island of Lesbos. On the same day, so each day, 5,000 tourists were arriving there as well. So of course, migrants were confronted by tourists, and tourists were confronted by migrants as well. You had the situation that tourists were swimming and bathing in the Mediterranean Sea, and next to them was a boat with refugees arriving. But we have experienced there a great wave of help as well. So especially people from the tourism industry helped the arrival migrants. They had the capacities and the facilities to help the arrival immigrants. But what is happening now in the destinations? What is the meaning here for the destinations and maybe for Greek tourism as well? Are the tourism raising fears? Are tourists scared of refugees here? Are the destinations scared of refugees? What we can say from our perspective now is that the bookings for Samos declined to the Greek newspaper by 40% this February. The bookings on Lesbos even declined by 90%. Cruise ships are changing their routes. They are not going to Lesbos, they are going to the island of Lemnos now. Even airlines changed their routes. And Arnold Donald, the CEO of Carnival Corporations, so the largest cruise ship operator, he's telling that the migrant crisis may hurt the cruise ship travel in the whole European region. If I may quote him, he's saying that images of bodies washing ashore and refugees packed in rafts are having a psychological impact on the customer behavior. So tourists don't want to go on the cruise ships anymore because they are scared to meet refugees. But on the other hand, we have a different situation in the destinations as well. We have an increasing volunteer tourism here. People are traveling to the destinations to help migrants. There's a good example of an airline, TUI Fly Nordic, which allows its passengers, which are traveling to the destinations like Kos or Lesbos, to take additional 10 kilograms baggage for free to help the migrants. Then tourists who are coming to the region just because they wanted to go on holidays, sunbathing, swimming in the sea, they are changing their travel plans when they are arriving in the destination and see the current situation there. They are preparing food for the refugees and so on. So we have a lot of change here. But this, of course, is just the meaning for the Greek islands confronting the Turkish coastline. In total, we have to say, Greek tourism is doing really well. And it's a good question if the image from the islands will maybe have an impact on the whole Greek tourism economy, which is really important because the GDP of Greece is 25% from tourism here. Let's have a look maybe first on destinations who are even longer dealing with refugee crises. A destination that comes in mind is always Lampedusa, I guess. When we hear of Lampedusa, or I have to say for my case, when I hear of Lampedusa, I don't think of scenic beaches, I'm just thinking about refugees. And there's a Professor Friese from University of Chemnitz. She was researching for a long time on Lampedusa, on hospitality. And what she recognized in the interviews she conducted is that the local population it isn't really bothered by the refugees arriving on Lampedusa. The national tourists are still coming to the island, but international tourists are not coming because they are just combining the destination with refugees. They think there are refugees all over the place. And through refugees, you have a high militarization on the island as well, which scares tourism, and they stay away. So there you have a conflict between the family businesses of tourism and the refugees. If we have a look at that picture here, you could think that it shows the current situation in Greece or Macedonia at the moment. But that picture was taken 25 years ago, 1991, when Albania opened its borders and thousands of Albanians escaped, especially to the neighboring countries like Greece and Italy. What can we maybe learn from the past here? First of all, they were not really welcome in the new countries, the migrants. Albanians were seen as lazy, criminals. Maybe some of you have this picture in mind as well, from the boat Flora that arrived in the port of Bari in 1991. And most of these migrants were sent back to Albania later. But thousands of migrants stayed in Greece or in Italy. And through time, the image of the Albanians changed as well. They are now more and more known as hardworking people, and most of them found jobs in the tourism industry, because tourism makes it normally relatively easy to enter. But the problem about tourism is, if international tourists are going to the destinations, they want to be served in Greece by a Greek hotel owner or Greek restaurant owner. So for the refugees, it's always hard to be a proper host in the new destination. But they cannot be a guest anymore because they are staying already too long in the destination here. So to sum it up, in the short term, you have refugees arriving in the destination and the media is reporting about it. So tourists stay away. But in the long term, you have the chance that the image of the migrants is changing and that they can start a job in the tourism industry. What else do we have for examples of the combination between migration, tourism, escape? A really good example, I guess, can be found in the city of Augsburg in southern Germany. It's a house where refugees and hotel guests are living under one roof. So unconditional hospitality is meeting conditional hospitality in the same place. And the staff, just volunteers are working as a staff there. So the service quality might not be too high, I guess. But the relational quality is really high in that hotel, because you have the interaction as a guest with other guests, you can have the interaction with refugees, and you can have the interaction with the hotel staff, who takes a lot of time to share experiences with you. And I think this discussion about relationship quality is really important in tourism. During time, hospitality shifted, especially in the Western culture, more and more from a private to a commercial issue. Especially during the growth of tourism, a high relationship quality was replaced by a higher and higher service quality. Hosts do not have the time to share experience anymore with the guests, not on an interpersonal level. It was replaced by a high service quality, like really good infrastructure, smooth processes, or a good design. So destinations have started to realize that they shouldn't just focus on high service quality, but that relationship quality is really important. And like Central Switzerland, last year was declared as the year of hospitality, so they have started to realize that it's important to focus on this as well. And I think this whole discussion about migrants, about new guests, about unconditional hospitality can be a way to improve tourism products then as well. This is another good example coming from Vienna, from Austria. It's a hotel where refugees are working as the hotel staff. So from 14 countries the staff is coming from, and they're representing the motto of the hotel to stay open-minded. We have the discussion in tourism as well, that old and rundown hotels refurbish their rooms on the cost of the communes and the municipalities. And tourism industry has now, I think, a good chance to show that it is a hospitable and cosmopolitan industry, like this example from the campaign from the Federal Association of German Tourism Industry is showing us. Even a hotel owner from Austria, he's calling out for open houses and for refugees in every hotel, a room for refugees in every hotel. We have the Austrian Hotel Association, which is opening lodges for refugees, and the German Association of Hotels and Restaurants, which are training refugees at the moment, so that they can get jobs in the tourism industry. But even if economy tries to bring refugees into job, through the law, it's sometimes not so easy, and we have always limits and borders of hospitality as well. Let me explain that through a short story, and let me please conclude with that story. It's about Bedouin hospitality. If a traveler is walking through the desert and is meeting a Bedouin, the Bedouin will invite him to his place and will pour him a cup of tea. And this cup of tea, the first cup of tea, is called the guest bowl. And that shows to the guest that the guest is welcome and that he can relax. The second cup of tea that the Bedouin is pouring to the guest shall show that the guest should feel even more welcome. It's the indulgence bowl. The third cup of tea represents the sword bowl, which shows that the host will even defend his guest, if necessary, by sword. But on the other way around, if the host gets attacked, the guest has to help him as well. And if a Bedouin ever wants to pour you a fourth cup of tea, please reject it, because hospitality has always a limit. And I think this example shows us as well that hospitality is maybe not just about tourism, maybe about other fields as well, like escape, migration, maybe the economy. So maybe it's time for a new framework of hospitality here. Thank you for the attention.
Nordhorn for the expiring keynote and that you filled in. Harald Pechlana. I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Verena Papke and I'm going to lead the discussion, and I would like to introduce the panel people here to discuss the panel Escape, Migration and Tourism. George Drakopoulos, he is President and CEO of Tourism Generis and Special Advisor to the Secretary General of the United Nations World Tourism Organization. On the left, Professor Dr. Jürgen Schmude, President of the DGT and Professor for Economic Geography and Tourism Research from Munich. And on the left side, Dr. Dirk Leser, Director of the Sustainable Development Program, and already here, Christian Nordhorn, who told us about escape and migration and tourism, and who give us an introduction on that topic. You pointed out some quite theoretical things, and I think, as we have heard, that the movement of refugees creates big challenges for tourism destinations. So the panel opens a big field and a lot of questions we could talk about, but I think we have mainly focus on some points. And we have somebody from Greece here, from the Greek islands. And I think it would be quite interesting just to have an idea, or just to give us a short update how you, or how your perception and how you think the situation in Greek or on the Greek islands is at the moment.
Yep. First of all, I would like to thank you for choosing Greece to deal with this very important issue, which I will put it under the umbrella of a crisis. It has been said and written in the academic world, and we have the confirmation in the real life, that tourism in many countries around the world, they will have a crisis very, very frequently. So tourism destinations should be always prepared to manage a crisis, mostly on communication level. The refugee crisis consists of a kind of crisis communication for Greece. There have been images and photos and videos what happened the last summer, where the islands were unprepared. And yes, it was true that the refugees came and were all around the island, or in the main areas of the island. This does not happen anymore. The islands are organized. They have these reception areas, which in the Brussels dialect is called hotspots. They register there, they go to the camp, and they either go directly to the boat to Athens, or they stay in the camp until there is a free seat on the boat. So if you go now to the islands, you hardly get an idea that there are refugees. It's what happened last year and what stays still in the media. You made a reference about the decrease in the bookings, decline. It was a typical statement as has been perceived by a journalist, to another not rational statement by a hotelier. By this particular tour operator, I have a 90% decline in my bookings, which is true. From a tour operator, a small hotel in the north of island of Lesbos had 90%, but only by one tour operator. Obviously, the media has taken this figure and made it public. Everybody now believes that it's minus 90. No, it's below 30, and it will pick up. The challenge now is what the reaction of the destinations should be, and how prepared are those destinations to react. Well, it is more than clear that there is no problem on the tourism product. Hotels are there, renovated with enriched services. The beaches are there, the sun is there, the food is there, the culture is there. So whatever consists a tourism product is there, untouched. So why some tourists do not want to go there? Because there is a perception of a fear, of a risk, of aesthetics, which are fully understood. So the reaction on behalf of destinations shouldn't be on perception level. We have to communicate how the current situation on the island is, which means certain actions. But it's very important to understand from the top governmental level to every single tourism people level that there's a different thing what happens with the tourism product and what is the perception of the public opinion in an origin country.
So you say that it's not a problem of the product, of the tourism product, it's on perception and how the imagination or how the perception might change of the destinations. Maybe Dirk Leser could point out some things about that.
On the issue of perception, yeah. Let me first add the very important line of thinking that here, when we speak about this issue, we have a humanitarian issue, and how important a humanitarian issue is before we discuss other things. And people fleeing conflict and war need to be helped. And this is a priority. And this priority is dominating, first of all, our solutions. Then later on, we have, as the panel was, or the title was suggesting, we have a discussion with what is happening in the tourism sector in that context, when we see persons fleeing conflict, and at the same time we have the situation that tourism is happening. Mm-hmm. And we have to first of all answer the question to what extent can we limit the unnecessary negative impact on the tourism sector. Mm. Then we heard before what are the opportunities the tourism sector in the mid and long term can offer to offer employment, to support integration for those in need. But I think if we start right now into the most imminent question and focus on that one, what is right now needed to limit the unnecessary impact on the tourism sector, I second the analysis of perceptions. But I also wanted to look back into the discussion we had in academia in the 60s and 70s when it came to travel. What does it mean for the local population when you are traveling and visiting another destination? What does it mean for those, and what is it they want right now when they are visited from those who are visiting them? It's a social interaction. It's human beings seeing each other. This discussion was quite emotional, taking place back then in the 70s and 80s, and there were many suggestions how to solve that. But what we know by now, what is one of the most important things to resolve that, is a participatory approach. We have to talk to the people. What do you really want as local population in your development? What is it you want right now in support? What is it you want to see happening in your living space? This discussion is continuing, and there's overall general agreement in the world that a participatory approach is crucial for the success of the tourism sector's development, but also for the success of development of societies. Now, crucial in that is dialogue, communication, open communication, understanding, taking the points, managing expectations. Putting that aside right now and coming back to the issue of perceptions and image. And I think that is what is another very important discussion point for us. What does it mean, the general image of a destination, and at the same time, what does it mean, the image of a destination for tourism purposes? How is this built? How is it perceived? And one way of experiencing it is on the ground. Yeah, through the tourist or by the local population. And what we know is that over there, very often there is a similar perception of the circumstances, where the distortion very often comes from when it comes to not directly experienced images, yeah, which are portrayed through other channels of communication, stereotypes. And there we have then this unnecessary impact we just heard when there's a misperception of a situation where people actually stay away from a place where there's no reason to stay away. Dislinking that right now from the current discussion and putting that to natural disaster, we see this over and over, that people stay away from a certain place, although the place as such has not changed at all. It's just the wrong perception of that. And I want to leave it at this initial statement and think that with highlighting three of these core elements, we can advance today's discussion a little bit, but in any case, it's a huge challenge we address here in 40 minutes, and we definitely will have not answered all the questions, but I see that as part of the challenge.
But is it just a wrong perception? But I think you still have that coexistence from like tourists and refugees at the same places. So you have to, you have to run social responsibility and to serve tourists at the same time, which is a big challenge for tourist destinations, even for operators, for hotels. So maybe you can just point out some answers to that question, if it's just only a question of perception. Not of reality.
I think that's a hard one. Of course, the perception in the media, I guess, we all have a quite different perception of the destinations now, after the refugee crisis happened now, I guess. Like you said before, the tourism product is still a good product in the destinations there. So if it will change for a longer time, we have to see. I mean, when you see like terror attacks in destinations, normally tourism after 1-2 years, it's starting to increasing again, and the perception will not last for a couple of years. So we'll see how this works for the next time.
But maybe you can just point out, is it that, that tourists stay at home? Because you said, we had a talk before, and you said that's not a problem. So the economic development went quite well, and it's just on a micro point of view that it's just a problem of the Greek islands.
This is what the experience says so far. Don't forget that Greece is under a financial crisis for the last 6-7 years. Can I show you some figures of that, if you don't mind? Can I have a couple of slides I have put on the presentation so you get a better idea? Can I have the grid, please, so I'll go quickly to a slide, not to take much time. So I took the figures for Greek tourism from 1993 to oh, sorry. This is in direct advertising. Now it will come now to place. Here we are, there's the basic figures. The last 7 years, we have a decline of GDP minus 26%. There have been the perception that Greece is starving. Greeks do not have enough food. Shall they have enough food to feed the tourists? People queuing out in the ATMs, while in Oxford Street every day in London is full of people queuing in the ATMs. However, the international arrivals grew up by 48%, and the revenues went up 22%. the contribution of tourism, direct and indirect, increased. And that period was Greece in a crisis, and the international media focused on Greece. But tourism, as elsewhere, has been proved very, very resilient. And we had to communicate that Greek tourism, the Greek product was there. The commercial side of the hospitality was there. And maybe was another humanitarian element, but that was purely commercial, and it worked. Now we have the challenge to work that again. Once I find the solution here, no, I'll go the right way, wrong way. Can I have the grid, please, again? No, I'm lost in the, as I cannot control that, but it will come again with the latest figures. It's again the typical, here we are. During those years, Greek tourism had an increase, and those are the years we had an increase in arrivals and revenue. So if you put them all together, and if we add the macroeconomic indicators within a decade, not from year 1 to year 10, but if we add all 10 years, we see in 2001 to 2010 we had a balance, 5 years up, 5 years down. If we look to the latest years, and particularly including 2015, we have 8 years with continuous increase. It's a good time to invest in Greek tourism, while Greece in a crisis. And please remember that when I say how, and we can discuss next March, this year Greece will have an increase, again, because the tourism product has been improved, offers a better value for money, and thank you all for putting us in the media for many reasons. So it will be like this, because this is a product, and I want to leave you with that. There are different flows of refugees and migrants from one way, and different ways for tourists. And as a friend of mine said, tourists used to visit places where history is being made. You don't go to places without history, one way from another. Simply, you need to invest hard on segmentation. You must have a long-term plan to be proactive to the media and create the right structures. And I'll leave you with a nice photo. Can you put the photo back, please? Thank you.
So thank you for that short introduction and to sum up some points on the economic point of view. But I want to come back to the perception and to the image of destinations, because Professor Schmude is an expert on security issues and security questions. And we are also talking about that question if images of destinations changes on the long term. So, for example, Lampedusa. Everybody knows Lampedusa, and it's connected only and exceptional to refugees. So will it also become a question of how destinations are in our imagination? And is it also becomes a question of safety, that we stay away from this destination?
Yes, of course, because tourists are looking for safe destinations, and everything what shows this destination in the perception of the tourist may be unsafety, unsecure. That leads to the decision not to go to the destination. From the research, we know there are different perceptions by different groups of tourists, and we have a really wide range of interpretation, what is safe and what is secure. So at the moment, we can identify 3 groups of tourists. So one group, which is very small in Germany, is the wait-and-see group. They don't book now, and we heard it these days on the ITB every day. People are waiting. What is the development in the next weeks or months? And I'm sure they will book. We don't know what they will book. Where do they go to? The second group is a group that I call destination switcher. They will switch the destination because they are looking for sun, sand, and sea destination, and there are enough destinations that fulfill the expectations of these tourists. So they don't go to Greece anymore, pardon, but they go to Italy, they go to Spain, they go to France, perhaps they go to Turkey. That's another question. And the third group, which is also rather small, is a group of the repeater. They don't care about the situation. You can say they accept the situation, and they will travel once again in the destination affected by the flux of refugees. But when we discuss the topic, we have always to keep in mind that we have a very big range of various actors, not only the tourists. We have the inhabitants, we have the tour operators, we have the refugees itself, we have the DMOs. And what is very important to me is that we always have in mind which perspective do we talk about. So, and I was talking about the perspective of tourists.
Yeah, maybe we have a look on the perspective of inhabitants who have to deal with the big flow of refugees and how have to keep that infrastructure, that touristic infrastructure run at the same time where they have to deal with refugees. And you give some slides on hospitality. And we were talking before because you told me that you think that the Germans are quite well prepared for refugees because hospitality is not a question of authenticity, it's a question of infrastructure. And I think that's quite interesting. If this is true, what does hospitality mean to us? Dr. Gläser.
I really don't know right now how to answer that question, but the infrastructure link, I'm not having really clear right now.
Yeah, because we talked before, maybe you can add some points, because
obviously that goes beyond tourism. You discuss about that when you have reached a point that you have a status within a certain destination, either it's an island, it's a whole country, you have a number of refugees, which is an extra segment. I'm using sometimes marketing terminology, but I'm afraid I have to use it to facilitate and make the discussion easier. And you have to integrate them. If we think about the near future huge demographic problem of Europe, and what does it mean, how nations should react. I mean, birth rates in most European countries are going down. Germany and Greece are very sound examples. You need a system to integrate. And if we look in the history, Germany has done it very, very well. Well, Americans are even better managers. They melt all cultures in one pot. But Germany being an economic strong country with good structures, with discipline, which is a very important factor in those integration process, it has proved that they do it better. How many are the non-German inhabitants of this country now? It should be 10 million, or something like that. 4 million other Turks, 2 million more or less other Greeks, plus Spaniards, Portuguese, Polish. It should be something easily 1/10 of the population which are not Germans. And they have integrated very well. They speak the languages, they are part of the economy. And I think there's a clear direction. There is a clear relation between the level of economic and industrial development of a country and the way they can efficiently integrate those people. While most of the European countries have to do that. And they will do it better if there is a consensus within the European Union and react as one country, one destination altogether. But still, we see these micro benefits from, I would say, politicians not familiar with the history and maybe a short vision, they cannot do it. Germany is leading the way again. Even in Greece, you know, there was some time it was an anti-Merkel sentiment. Merkel has proved one of the best friends of Greece by being European, more European than any other leader in the European Union. And I'm pretty confident that they will do it well and give us the example and the way how to do it.
But we won't have that political discussion. We are just clear that we are not going to do a
There is a political dimension, I'm afraid.
Sure, of course it is, but we have to keep that touristical or the tourist point of view. But maybe we can come back to that point you were telling about, that some other destinations profit because, for example, we don't go to Greece anymore, we go to other sunny and sandy destinations, and if they're also on their destinations who have to deal with the refugee problems, maybe arises another market of tourists, for example, all the volunteers and all the people who comes to that islands to help. Is there another market, maybe back to Christian Nordhorn, arises?
I think the situation at the moment in the Mediterranean to go to sandy beaches in a really stable and safe condition is not that easy to find at the moment. If you have a look at the situation in Egypt, it's unstable, you have terror attacks in Turkey. So from my perspective then, Greece looks still like a safe country. And that would put up a question from my side, I would say. Because, Professor Schmude, when you say some people are feared or scared to go to Greece at the moment, do they think Greece as a whole country, or that just feared?
Just some destinations,
just
within,
some destinations there, right?
within Greece, and we have also a group of tourists that is shifting from certain destinations within Greece to others, and they come still to Greece.
Yeah.
Okay. But there's a parallel. You mentioned the terror attacks in touristic destination, and we know from research that the more often bad news about terrorism or the problem of refugees are disseminated, the longer the time span will last that this destination is stigmatized. The destination will get an image in the perception of tourists, and fortunately, the memory of tourists is not that long. They forget. You mentioned 1 to 2 years. We also have experience with destination where the situation is better after 1 year, after 6 months again, for example, Bali. So that's an important aspect, I think.
Yes, let me add a point to that, because I'm not really in favor of speaking about countries and risk assessment, unless you really can link that to the country. There are places which have different risks, and we should go away, especially, we should show responsibility in the tourism sector to have that clear understanding, to limit any kind of action to the necessary and to avoid unnecessary repercussion. We are not in favor of recommending travel against a specific country unless this is absolutely necessary. We at WTO have struggled with travel advice for a very long time. Travel advice which is just directed as a country is wrong. We have the global consensus that this should be done geo-referenced down to the place. The place where there is an incident, where there is the assessment of an incident, where there is the assessment of an increased risk. I just want to make that clear, because you mentioned here 2, 3 countries and you said it's not safe to travel through them. This is a discussion we have behind us. Right now you see that travel advice, emergency information, tourism information is geo-referenced. That's what we need to have. Because that way, there is no one big country you are traveling to. You are choosing over there a tourism destination. And what we have to allow is to have a sustainable development and a resilient development of these destinations happening, and to limit, again, I want to underline that, to limit the unnecessary repercussion, whether this is a health event, a tourism security event, whether this is a humanitarian issue. Tourism has to interact with all these issues and try to continue to be responsible towards their own guest, the local population, and at the same time to continue whenever it is possible in these framework conditions.
So it's
I totally agree with you, but this is a perspective of you. From the tourist perspective, and we know that from our research, the perception is different. The further away the destination is, the more diffuse is a mental map in the heads of the tourists. And the greater is the region that is stigmatized. So we have to care about that. And people coming from far away from North America, they say Greece is unsure. They don't say Lesbos or Kos is unsure.
So it's all about communication, actually.
Yeah.
Okay.
And using modernity. I mean, we know about that distance hypothesis. We know about the general perceptions. Tourists are guided, and nowadays they are using modern IT to be guided when choosing their destinations. But we have to be present in those places to help and aid. So we know about this deficiency of the individual, but at the same time we have a huge opportunity to assist him when he's on Google Maps searching for how is the beach looking like. We know that certain destinations, when they had an oil spill, that was in the Gulf of Mexico, they used then webcams to assist people, look, there is actually normality, and correct this wrong perception.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what is important to know, there is this problem, but there are the means. Let's apply those means to, again, limit the unnecessary repercussion that can have for the local population and those who actually have invested into the economic activity of tourism.
Yeah.
So maybe what's the responsibility of the tourist industries and those destinations, you know, to show what the situation is in, like you said, in reality. It's not a question of perception, it's a question of reality. So how is the tourist industry, or maybe like hoteliers and somebody who's at that place that's responsible to transport that imagination or that image of that destination? What can operators maybe do to change the imagination of that destination, that it's not packed with refugees, what we see in the media or what we see on TV?
Well, first of all, I think, and this is the very difficult thing we have to mention this panel, the refugee as such is not a problem. Yeah? We have to focus again, I mean, this is a humanitarian issue. We have to focus on that, not just there is another problem, how can we deal with the problem? There is a humanitarian crisis, and what can we do as societies about the humanitarian crisis, and to what extent can we responsibly deal at the same time in those destinations about this situation? And that is, I think, communication. We have to engage those who are receiving these people, directly have to accommodate them, the local population, engage them. You remember the first pictures nearly everywhere, which were welcome pictures. People being committed to help others. Now, we have to keep communications going on and address their concerns and to see how we find solutions together. So the tourism sector is not well advised by just seeing right now, how can I promote that I'm actually not affected, but you saw in the different panels which took place here, also what the tourism sector is offering as opportunities in the mid and long term. This is not necessarily an opportunity for tomorrow, but how can tourism generate jobs, bring these abilities again into life perspectives. So I know it's difficult to accommodate all these different views here in the panel, but just a call again for, we are speaking here about a humanitarian issue as well.
Of course, we are working on a humanitarian issue. As I'm working for SOS Mediterranean, was a civilized organization for rescue refugees in distress in the Mediterranean. I think I know about that question, but I think that's the thing we have to bring together, because you have that humanitarian question, you have that economic question on the other side, you have that communication question, and you have to bring all that things together. So this is something we have to talk about, and you also, I think that was one point you just mentioned, we have to deal with the humanitarian problem, and that's how we understand hospitality in Europe. And as we see some pictures on TV, and then we talk about hospitality, we come back to the beginning of your keynotes. Mm-hmm. So what does it mean for a civil society to deal with hospitality on that refugee and humanitarian question?
Yeah, that's what I said in the beginning, that hospitality is always the relation between the host and the guest. And if a guest is in that case a migrant, there we're at the start of the discussion, like if we can draw conclusions from that on the touristical meaning as well. And it's getting really political. Like if you say a country that behaves restrictive against refugees, it's then not a hospitable country. We cannot say that, and this would be not true because it's different from person to person what kind of hospitality is showing. But coming back to this relational aspect, I think this is a really important issue, and we have seen it, we have experienced it in Greece, or we have seen it from the media, that really people started to help the arrival migrants. And this could be a good advertisement, I think, as well for Greek tourism then, when really hotel owners opened up their houses or were cooking food, bringing food to refugees. This is then a really positive picture, I would say, as well for tourism in the destination. And we shouldn't just always focus like, oh, it's unsecure to go there because there's a surge of refugees at the moment. I think pictures from the train station in Munich were a good advertisement for Munich as well, when you saw all the help coming from the local inhabitants as well. So we shouldn't just see it always from a critical perspective, maybe that refugees are putting away the tourists. Maybe we can show through that hospitality for our destinations and for our regions as well.
So to give it this positive notes and to bring it to the good image of destinations. And we also come back to the economic point of view, because we were talking about, you pointed out some groups of tourists who came to different destinations. For example, the adventurer, are also coming back to that volunteers who just come to that island just in order to help. So maybe there might be some changes on tourist markets. Do you think in Greece there might be, you know, a new rise, there arises a market of tourists, new tourist markets?
Well, there is obviously an impact in terms of economic activity, because many non-governmental organizations, and there are many volunteers there, and they're using some resources, but obviously this is not a part of a tourism development plan. It's a reaction of the civil society, which, okay, activates a part of the supply side of the tourism economy, but this cannot be for long. It's a temporary action. Let's say in Lesbos, many hotels and restaurants stay open in the winter, but they're afraid now if there will be another winter like this. Now this happens. It happens. I'm afraid that from now on, we have to be prepared for unexpected conditions and situations. And flexibility and communication should be the name of the game. And do not forget that all tourism investments are long-term investments. Tourism activity is a long-term activity, so we have to give our result at the end of a certain period, not at the end of one tourist period for 1 year. Mm-hmm. How it goes up and down.
Yeah, just maybe to the back to the infrastructure the destinations have to provide in their areas, and you always said that there might be some changes of tour operators. You pointed out that cruise ship lines who changes their ports. So if you are all tourist or tourism experts, how do tour operators, not only tourists, but how do tour operators react on that perceptions and also of that changes of destinations?
One of the most critical decisions when it comes to perceptions is the decision whether you continue operating charter flights for the next season to a specific destination. That is a concern we see on the heads of many who have to take the decisions for the next season and build the packages. So here, sometimes unnecessary decisions are taken which have unnecessary impacts, because you believe that in the upcoming season there is no demand, and because of that you shift charter capacity to other regions, and you anticipate actually a perception. And Egypt worked for the very first time on that issue, and then tried to absorb as a destination this risk for somebody who's operating a charter flight to the country. So accessibility is one of the most crucial things, which is anticipating perception, and destinations have to strongly work on the fact that the destination remains accessible. So that, to answer your infrastructure question, if I would to suggest to prioritize, it's the accessibility to the destination, remaining open for business.
Mm-hmm. And at the destinations, so what do you have the providers to make sure that they stay as an attractive destinations for tourists?
Continue business as usual. It's not a big science on that. It will take some time to adapt, but if you are committed to your quality, to your value for money, to keep on doing business as usual, as I said, ups and downs, it will come back soon. There is an interesting point about infrastructure now, how things can improve for the early future. In those 3 Greek islands, a lot of money from Brussels were there. And I had a discussion 2 days ago with the president of the Lesbos Hotel Association, and he said the area between the port and the marina, which last year was something like a camp for the refugees, now has been totally renovated. We made new gardens, new benches, new things like that. It's much, much better than before. But simply, it's only the locals, they know that. Was the extra money went there, and obviously this infrastructure will stay for future use. So the first tourists will go there, and they feel the difference. Obviously, they will communicate it back. Then again, the challenge is how destinations can quickly react, again, on perception level. That's the key. And we discuss. Dick, you know that you have written the book, and ministers say, well, we are preparing ourselves for this and that. And when it comes to time to react, the reaction is too slow until the next minister. Changes very frequently.
So we have to react
Yep.
more quickly. So if you have no other suggestions or any other questions, I think I would end that discussion.
If I may add, we have
sorry.
been all taken to discuss the impact of the refugee crisis, and we often neglect the reason about this. Mm-hmm. So if you please stop the war, and all these companies who sell weapons made enough money, and I mean, they can live for the next years in a very nice life. So stop that, and I think we will go much better. And otherwise, we will never stop discussing about the reaction. But the reaction has a reason, the action. And what's the action? Huh? It's not dependent on these poor people.
So thank you very much for that political message at the end of the discussion, which was quite important, I think. So thank you to Christian Nordhorn for that keynote. Thank you to Dr. Dirk Leser. Thank you for Georgios Didakopoulos. And thank you, Professor Dr. Jürgen Schmuder. Thank you. Thank you to you for your audience.